term thrills and chills is a very common one in pop culture, and we all have horror movies to thank for that. You know, I'm something of a pop culture enthusiast myself, so it only makes sense for me to cover each and every genre that you love. Keeping that in mind, the TV region is pumping up the spook factor today with the top 25 most iconic scenes from horror movies. It's hard to imagine modern horror films in Hollywood without turning to 2013's The Conjuring, a film that kicked off his very own franchise spanning multiple sequels and spin-offs as well. Now, what made this film particularly terrifying was the subtle build-up of tension and simplistic jump scares.
Nancy?
That are a lot more effective due to the construction of their scenes. Take this basement sequence for example. The whole hide and clap scenario was creepy AF and had me holding onto my seat the whole time. The final clap was so freaking scary that it became a calling card of sorts to the film in general. See, this is what I consider an organic jump scare in my mind, and it's really effective because it's not exactly a jump, but it comes out of nowhere and it serves as the perfect payoff to an anxiety-inducing sequence. The lack of music and extended periods of dead silence accompanied by sweeping camera shots easily makes this one of the most effective horror films in the 2000s era. Caroline's panic state totally sells the spookiness of the scene, and if there's anything I learned from this, is that I should never play hide and seek with the lights out.
Take it, Georgie.
Yeah, I've never liked clowns ever since I was a kid, and this particular sequence in itself was more than enough to convince me that my fear is absolutely justified. Pennywise is an effective horror character because you get the sense that he's got some kind of humanity in himself, even though his only agenda is to haunt kids all the way till they become grown adults. Having said that, the most iconic moment from 2017's It has got to be the opening sequence where Georgie meets Pennywise for the first time and...
Hiya, Georgie.
Unfortunately, the last time as well. This is once again a nicely spaced out sequence, which is really rare in modern horror films whose sole agenda is just shock value. Yes, Art, I'm looking at you. The Terrifier franchise may have more gore, but Pennywise is easily the better developed clown. Now, back to the entry. We're all shown a huge chunk of the clip in the trailer, but to actually watch Pennywise turn into his demonic state and drag poor Georgie down with him was haunting to say the least. You're forced to watch the rest of the film with a very uneasy feeling, having witnessed the end of an innocent child right at the start. I mean, that's brilliant storytelling if you ask me.
Think.
Jordan Peele made strong waves in the film industry with his directorial debut Get Out, and rightly so. In my opinion, it's still his best work to date, and the hypnosis scene is good enough for me to stake my claim. The timing of this sequence is almost perfect, as Chris has already been given enough of a reason to suspect something's up with the Armitage family after seeing their servants. And then, with Missy coming in as this voodoo weirdo, we get treated to the most visually engaging moment from the film. The sunken place is a pretty messed up spot to find yourself in, and Peele's rendition of this situation is displayed perfectly. The build-up to this moment is once again perfect because we slowly watch Chris deteriorate mentally as he continues talking to Missy about his past trauma. God damn it, even a freaking teacup isn't safe to be around nowadays. And yeah, before you come at me in the comments, let me make something very clear. Get Out is very much a horror film in every right, and I won't be listening to any keyboard warriors telling me it's a thriller. To all the ladies who keep saying they like tall men, do me a favour and watch 2014's It Follows. I want to see if you have the same opinion after this entry. On a serious note, this is an extreme gem of a film, and the tall man scene perfectly elaborates why low-budget flicks should be the need of the hour in today's content-heavy environment. Forget the whole allegories and metaphors related to STDs for a second, and just focus on how random the tall man's appearance is here. You might think that this is an abrupt moment, but that's exactly what the director wants you to think. With Jay already running away from an entity, she's led to a false sense of relief when her friends show up, but all of that goes to waste when she sees the tall man making a gigantic appearance. This is essentially a masterclass on how you should do horror without having to rely on cheap and sudden loud noises. This builds up tension, and sometimes that's more effective than any other method. Did I jump out my seat when I saw the tall man? No, but it scared the living daylights out of me, especially with that perfectly apt soundtrack. I mentioned Jordan Peele earlier, and now it's time to mention Ari Aster as another promising director who should definitely focus on making more films like 2018's Hereditary. I don't think I've seen such a great film that can cater to a modern audience while also keeping the essence of the genre in mind. There are quite a few impressive moments here, but the standout has got to be the super spooky finale where we see the possessed Annie hiding behind Peter in the most unobtrusive way possible. To be honest with you, I didn't even realise she was there until she moved a bit, and then I pissed my pants. Then there's the part where she hunts down her own son and then smashes her head against the ceiling because the demon possessing her apparently didn't know how to knock. The lack of sound enhances her moments to such a degree that you start doubting the walls of your own home. Annie moves around these walls with such grace that even Michael Jackson would crown her the new smooth criminal. I guess the King of Pop really foreshadowed it when he said, Annie, are you okay? But yeah, jokes aside, there's no doubt in my mind that Hereditary was one of the best films of 2018 in general, not just in the horror genre. Ah! They say minimalism is the way forward, and if you look at 2014's The Babadook as an example, then I'd have to agree. There's something about modern directors making a splash with their first full-length feature film, because Australia's Jennifer Kent totally nailed it with this film, despite having less than what could be called a small budget. This was one of the reasons why we didn't get to see the titular Babadook for long in the film, but in my opinion, that actually works in favour of the story, because he's shown as this lingering presence throughout the runtime. The scene where he actually does reveal himself is nothing short of terrifying, and I couldn't sleep for nights, simply because I kept imagining the Babadook on my freaking ceiling. Yeah, I know I just mentioned Annie doing the same thing in Hereditary in the previous entry, but this film came out 4 years ago, so it's basically the OG. But yeah, the painful silence accompanied by the sudden visual of this spooky monster all came together to give us all the perfect jump scare. Man, Australia already has it bad enough with the freaking spiders and other creepy crawlies out there, but now you got this dude to deal with as well. No way am I going to that country for a vacation, ever. There are a lot of things to look out for in a jump scare. The scene has to be constructed properly, the actual moment of the jump scare shouldn't feel forced, and most importantly, it has to move the story forward. 2010's Insidious probably gave us the best version of that in the 2010s era, when that goddamn red demon decided to come out completely against the run of play. Josh and Lorraine are just sitting there and trying to have a normal conversation when boom, your pants are wet, and it's not because you spilt your cola in the cinema hall. This is such an abrupt appearance, but the red demon totally helps the plot move further as he further fuels whatever Lorraine has already been seeing. Also, we as the audience realise that this entity isn't one to be messed with if he can manifest himself so easily in the real world. What also works here is that the jump scare is happening during the day, and we're not used to that at all, are we? Stuff like this is only supposed to be done in the dark, but I suppose rules are really meant to be broken. Also, huge shout out to Darth Maul for taking a break from Star Wars to play the role of the red demon. Well, Deborah Logan is technically Sarah's mom in this movie, but man, she sure looks old enough to be a grandma thanks to her demonic possession. This film is still unheard of unless you're talking to film bros, but the reason this particular scene is iconic is because of how it truly adds visual horror to the found footage genre. Yeah, we all know about the Blair Witch Project, but that movie heavily relied on implications and us using our own imagination. The monster on display here is truly sinister to watch, and the fact that it's forcing Deborah to eat her own daughter is as messed up as it can get. There's such a strong sense of realism here, and it's amazing to see how a film from 2014 can accomplish that, whereas modern flicks have such laughable effects. The flickering camera and uncertain odds totally escalate the stakes here, and I've got to give it to the director for being able to make such a high-quality moment from limited resources. On a side note, I love how the demon simply makes eye contact while swallowing Sarah's head and just goes like, "Do you mind? I'm trying to eat here."
あなたはもう動けない。神経だけは起こしておいてあげます。
Listen, I know I've always said that Taylor Swift fans are crazy, but Asami from 1999's Audition is a whole other level of psycho. Just look at the horrible things she does to Shigeharu over here.
ね?
Jesus Christ, woman. The only reason he was dating you was because he lost his wife. I'm sure the man's allowed to keep a photo of her. I'm not going to get into the details of how Asami tortured Shigeharu, but this entire scene comes across as a complete change in genre without coming across as a total shock. Like, you know something's up with Asami, you're just not sure what it is. Takashi Mike turns the crazy dial up to 1,000 in such a short time that we're not allowed to even recover from it till the movie ends. Up until this scene, it looked as if we were just watching a man's troubled journey of trying to get over his wife's demise. Instead, we learned that it doesn't matter how cute the girl is, you should never, ever trust her. The relief I felt when it all ended with Asami's passing couldn't be put into words. Yeah, I'm sure Shigeharu isn't ever going to date again. Heck, even his son's going to be traumatized every time he looks for a wife. Yeah, if you're a Silent Hill fan, then you've got this movie to thank for it. Jacob's Ladder is an underrated cult hit that was supremely ahead of its time and continues to amaze even to this day. While the movie has some deep psychological themes, I just want to bring your attention to its most iconic scene. The hospital sequence is easily one of the most haunting and disturbing moments in cinematic history, and the helplessness of Jacob in this situation is really what messes with us. Things were seeming completely normal right at the start, but the madness slowly starts to increase, almost as if Jacob has begun his descent to hell. There are so many traumatic visuals from this scene that it's hard to point out each and every one of them, but I will say that this particular moment alone is more than enough to place Jacob's Ladder as one of the best psychological horrors of all time. And yes, if a movie inspires a legendary video game, you know it's made a mark on pop culture. Oh, in this case, if you want to know what inspired those demonic figures in the scene, director Adrian Lyne said in an interview that he was inspired by the work of a very strange photographer and plastic artist called Joel Peter Witkin. Before Ethan Hawke became a kidnapping murderer in The Black Phone, he was a struggling writer in 2012's Sinister Man. This movie really knew how to spook its audience when they least expected it, and the lawnmower scene stands as a testament to that statement. The showcasing of snuff films is always a tricky scenario because as the audience, you'd expect something gruesome to happen. However, with the way things were going on in the clips, we're all led to believe that these tapes were probably just for the sake of spying on the targeted families. Of course, all of that was proven wrong when a seemingly harmless clip of a lawnmower suddenly runs over a freaking person. Like, what the heck, man? Jesus Christ. I literally jumped down my seat when I saw this in the cinema halls, and trust me when I say that I wasn't the only one in the audience who reacted this way. Full disclosure, this is the closest I've ever been to a heart attack while watching a horror movie. Seriously. Here's some trivia for you then. Co-writer Robert C. Cargill was inspired to create Sinister after a nightmare he had due to watching the 2002 American remake of The Ring. I guess you could say they really wanted his dreams to come true. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into the classics, so be prepared for a lot of legacy characters. Jason Voorhees has spearheaded the American slasher genre for decades, and while you may recognize him as the face of the Friday the 13th franchise, it's interesting to note that he wasn't the main villain in the first installment. That's right, the killer was actually his mom, and Jason only made an appearance towards the end of the film where he randomly pops out of the water and terrorizes Alice. Of course, the creators have mentioned that this was just supposed to be a dream, so we do see Alice later on in the hospital, but even so, this is the most iconic shot of the whole brand. It would give birth to multiple sequels over the course of several decades, some good and some not so good, but the point remains that the boat scene is one of the most memorable moments from 80s horror films. Also, I'm sure it led to a massive surge in the sales of hockey masks during Halloween. Is it really a horror movie list if it doesn't have The Exorcist in it? Hey, William Friedkin's 1973 masterpiece is widely regarded as one of the best horror films of all time, and rightfully so. This was the stuff of nightmares during its era, and the movie does still hold up today. As expected, a classic will always have multiple scenes worthy of a spot on this list, but I want to specifically point out to the actual exorcism scene. It's such a deadly moment, especially as you realise that the exorcism isn't exactly going ahead the way both of the priests had actually planned. What really works here is the intensity, which doesn't really rely on the abuse of visual effects or jump scares to get the audience engaged or anything like that. It's just a brilliantly executed scene showcasing the stakes and the true might of the Pazuzu demon. Fathers Damien and Lancaster may have been men of God, but the struggles they faced against Pazuzu further spooked audiences because it led them to doubt their own faith. Yeah, I'm sure a few people must have been like, heck, even the priest can't stop that thing. Might as well turn over to the dark side. Don't you just hate it when you're taking a nice bubbly bath and then Freddy Krueger decides to whip out his finger claws right in the middle of your business? Yeah, Nancy must have been feeling the same thing in 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. The movie was such an important moment for the horror genre because it had people believing that they're not safe even when they sleep. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind when you think of this film is the iconic bathtub scene. It's such a simple shot when you think about it, but the impact this had on horror simply can't be ignored. Yes, I'll admit that it was a bit odd for Freddy to withdraw his hand when Nancy's mom knocked on the door.
Nancy? What, Mother? Don't fall asleep in there.
Like, why are you scared of a teenage girl's mom? What's she gonna do? Ground you? Anyway, that's made up for instantly after as he drags poor Nancy inside the water when she falls asleep again.
Nancy!
And ever.
Okay, it's no secret that your boy is a Stanley Kubrick fan, but that's only because the man has directed certified classics throughout his entire career. It also comes as no surprise that the only horror film he's directed consistently finds itself at the top of several all-time lists. Yeah, 1980's The Shining remains one of the most influential and talked about horror films of all time, with several directors, including Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, James Cameron and the Coen brothers, all singing praises about this legendary work of art. One of the many scenes that perfectly captures the disturbing and unsettling aura of the film is the introduction of Danny to the twins. Yeah, these are the same twins that have inspired countless Halloween outfits for decades, and this shot is still used as a typical benchmark in film score when it comes to building the right atmosphere in a horror movie. With the way Kubrick carefully directs Danny's movements using the revolutionary Steadicam, it's almost as if the audience is carefully taken along for the ride, only to be suddenly disrupted by the creepy twins and the incredibly traumatizing visuals that follow.
Remember what Mr. Halloran said? It's just like pictures in a book, Danny.
Clear!
Have you ever heard of a situation where the surgeon is the one who gets his own body parts ripped off? Well, let me introduce you to John Carpenter's best film, 1982's The Thing. What was first considered to be a failure is now considered to be amongst the top horror movies of all time, so let that be a reminder to all of those of you who think that critics always get it right. Anyway, the defibrillator scene is one of the highlights of the film, and its shocking twist is mainly why this scene lands in my top 10. With Norris believed to be close to death, Cooper tried his best to revive his buddy, but all he got in exchange for his efforts was a monster mouth that chewed off both of his arms. The way this scene builds into the iconic moment is so perfectly crafted that I'm actually amazed the thing didn't set the box office on fire. Well, at least McCready made sure to set the Norris thing on fire to make sure he doesn't come out for more victims. Oh yeah, I also wanted to shout out that spider head thingy that tries to escape as a last-ditch effort. They totally nailed it with the practical effects on this one. This may come as a surprise to you, but if you've watched The Exorcist 3, you know exactly why this scene has found such a high spot on this list, even above the OG Exorcist film. So the overall vibe of the movie isn't really on the same scary level as Regan, but the hospital scene has got to be the most well-constructed jump scare of all time. This sequence has us on our feet the whole time because you just feel that something bad is going to happen. You can't exactly point it out. The first trigger moment isn't even a scare, so you're brought into a false sense of security, but then BAM! Spooky dude with giant scissors. The scariest thing about this is how insanely fast it comes out after the nurse closes the door. It catches you off guard so bad because it moves unnaturally and illogically at first. You never expect it. Plus, there were a couple of literal seconds before the nurse gets chopped in half, and this is exactly why I have trust issues. You don't need Dancing with Stars when you're dancing with the saws. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another horror classic, and its main character, Leatherface, went on to become a huge pop culture phenomenon. Now, I was conflicted when it came to choosing scenes, because the first sequence with Leatherface is also pretty cool. However, the most popular and parodied scene is the chainsaw dance, so I had to go with that one. It's one of the most perfect endings you could get to a horror film, as Sally manages to become Hollywood's first ever final girl, while the brutal villain remains alive, yet frustrated. The fact that the chainsaw was real and Gunnar Hansen still swung it with one hand shows how committed he was to this role. Maybe Denji from Chainsaw Man could learn a thing or two from him. Yeah, I know I mentioned The Thing as John Carpenter's best film, but Halloween is still his most popular film to date, so it only makes sense for this scene to rank higher. When it comes to iconic horror villains, Michael Myers ranks as Hollywood's OG slasher. Friday the 13th was literally made to copy the success of Halloween, and Jason Voorhees could very well be called the dollar store version of Michael Myers if we actually consider why he was created in the first place. Anyway, my focus is on one guy right now, and I'm going to move to the memorable moment where he gets back up to go after Laurie Strode just when you thought he was down and out for the count. It's such a subtle yet effective moment, and such things were quite rare back in the day, so it really stuck with the audience. Also, I'm pretty sure that The Undertaker modelled his iconic move after this scene. Either way, you can definitely tell that our boy Michael's been putting in that work on those abs. There's no way you can get back so smoothly without amazing core strength. Okay, so 2001's Mulholland Drive isn't a proper horror movie, but it's horror adjacent and it's directed by David Lynch, so it qualifies for this list. Plus, it has the scariest jump scare of all time, so it had to find its way into this list somehow. The diner scene with the hobo will freak anyone out who's seeing this for the first time, and I can bet my bottom dollar on that. Heck, it was scary enough to literally kill Dan. How on earth do you top a scene like this one? This is on par with the jump scare from The Exorcist 3, but what makes it rank higher is the scare factor. Nobody was expecting to see a hobo at that point, and the fact that this plays into what Dan was talking about earlier regarding his dreams makes this a complete scene with an immediate resolution. Well, actually the film in itself is so confusing that I still have a hard time figuring out its true meaning despite repeated viewings, but hey, at least we could find some kind of concept in this case. this still remains the most amazing horror transformation of all time, let alone werewolf movies. In my opinion, this is also one of the most realistic interpretations of what it would be like to transform into a werewolf. All the fear and unknown and agony that's usually involved in such a process is displayed perfectly well here. The abruptness with which David goes from happily reading to painful transformation hits super hard, and the jovial tune playing in the background surely elevates the sequence. Sure, it's not overly scary or anything like that, but just imagine watching the first ever wolf transformation. That's history right there.
That's history right there, you understand?
Okay, there may have been other transformations before this one, but American Werewolf in London was the film that made this subgenre of horror take off commercially. But yeah, it was painful to watch David like this. It was almost as if director John Landis wanted us to feel his pain as well. Oh, and before I forget, there's no amount of CGI in the world that will ever be able to top the practical effects used here. Yeah, you may be used to the action sequences from the Alien sequel on this channel, but let me tell you that this franchise's most iconic moment will forever remain the first ever chest burster scene with Kane. This was a scene that amazed and shocked audiences all over the world and had everyone talking about it for days on end. John Hurt's acting in this sequence is phenomenal and aids the overall impression it makes on the viewers. He's still twitching even after the alien emerges, which means that the dude is still somewhat alive after the brutality that has just been dealt to him. The actual chest burst in itself was a work of art, and kudos to Ridley Scott for giving us such a masterpiece of a scene. Spare a thought for Ellen Ripley though. The meal she was having with her colleagues before the chest burster scene was a final moment of normality. Actually, even the alien must have had a tough time. If you think about it from his perspective, the rest of the movie is pretty much Die Hard. Wow, I never thought I'd be covering a film that's over 100 years old, but here's Nosferatu on the TV Regent for the first time. To the uninformed, this was the first ever proper vampire movie to have graced the silver screen, and the titular villain had audience members shaken to their very core when they first witnessed him. The build up to this entrance is top-notch stuff, and before you start talking about how it isn't really that scary, let me remind you that this film was released in 1922. It's a freaking silent movie, for crying out loud. People were only just being introduced to the concept of horror back then, and this character has been showcased across media countless times ever since then.
Here's Johnny!
If you saw the twins earlier, you must have expected this scene to show up somewhere as well. You can't ignore the axe scene from The Shining in any scenario, and the super iconic "Here's Johnny" line remains a legacy quote even to this day. Jack Torrance totally owns his character here as he brutally smashes through the bathroom door with his axe, while poor Wendy just stands there in horror. This scene has been recreated and parodied hundreds of times over 40 years plus across movies, TV shows, music videos, and God knows what else. Also, here's a fun fact for you. Since Jack Nicholson had experience as a firefighter, he was able to break the bathroom door quite easily. As per my research, this scene only took 3 days to shoot and went over as many as 60 prop doors to get the iconic shot. Well, you can't really complain when you're making history in the process. Now, if you're a horror aficionado, then this should have been an easy guess for you, considering that The Shining entry didn't claim the top spot. Alfred Hitchcock was one of cinema's peak directors in general, and the shower scene in Psycho totally changed the horror genre forever. I mean, the audience was tricked into rooting for a person they believed to be the main character, only for her to get murdered in the shower not long after. This kind of thing was unheard of back in 1960, and the shower scene could easily have been considered way too violent for the culture at the time. Also, this is an odd piece of trivia, but apparently it was taboo to show and play the flushing of a toilet in films. Psycho was the first ever US movie to do so, and it went on to build the base for what would eventually become a hugely popular genre. Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you're going to enjoy.